Hey everybody, good afternoon. I am not in a house or in a backyard today, but I am out with some a beautiful stand of maple trees, north end of Guelph, undisclosed location. Here with John.
Hey everyone.
He's a part of the steering committee and the board of the Guelph Tool Library, and in his spare time that he somehow still has, he likes to tap maple trees. And so he's going to give the demo from a distance. I'm going to answer questions as we go. And yeah, we're going to show how we do it and show you some different tools, what's available at the tool library if you want to try it out yourself. And we're going to start off by identifying maple trees. So I'm going to switch the camera around. And we're going to talk about, first off, how we identify a sugar maple in the wild, in your yard, or wherever you want to do some tapping. One of the first clues is we've got this beautiful kind of gray toned bark color, but the texture isn't always indicative of the tree. Around the base of this tree, and we know that there's no other trees around except for other of the same species, but we have some dried up maple leaves at the base. So that is one way. Of course, in the spring or in the summer, you can identify your trees ahead of time for next year. But if you're just trying it out for the first time, you have no idea, look around, we've got maple leaves. Additionally, if we look up, hopefully I can focus on a specific part of this tree, we're looking for opposite branching, especially at the ends there. We can kind of see that there's double tips on the end, and little Ys at the end coming out. And they also have a reddish tone, which also indicates sugar maple buds. So that's another way you can figure that out. And we'll find out in a minute here if it actually is a sugar maple that is producing sap, because it'll actually drip out for us, hopefully. So that's the ID for the tree. In terms of choosing a location to tap, you want to look at the south side of the tree, the side of the tree that's getting the most sun exposure. We can also tell that this tree has been tapped in the past, so that's also a good indicator. The height doesn't really matter so much. It's more about your accessibility to the buckets, keeping them out of the way of animals that could drink from the ground, things like that. Some places have to tap really high because the snow is still really deep around their trees, but the sun has kind of eaten away at the snow at the base of this particular tree. And so John, how do you like to get started choosing a location on the tree?
Sure. These are all 100-year-old maple trees, so they're awesome trees. They give me lots of sap. But you can tap any tree that's a maple tree. It doesn't have to be a sugar maple. So a Norway or red or silver, they'll all give you sap that you can turn into syrup. The beautiful thing about sugar maples is that the concentration of sugar in the sap is much higher, so there's less boiling. So that's the best thing about sugar maple. So when I am tapping these trees, since I've already tapped them, and as Meredith pointed out, there's a couple of spots that I've tapped on already. One of the things that happens, it's like when you get a cut or an injury around where there's a hole, you'll form like a scar. So you can't see it on the surface, but underneath, the wood where I have tapped has changed behind, and so the wood has changed slightly. There's less flow of sap through that area. Tapping doesn't damage a tree, but you want to make sure you're at least 6 inches away. I'd prefer to go a foot away from any previous taps that I've done. This tree is very nice. One of the things I look for is a nice smooth surface that I can get my drill into, and there's not a lot of bark. Because this tree is so old, there's a lot of bark that sticks out, and that might be an issue for getting your bucket to hang nicely. But we've got a nice spot here. Not only is it facing in the south direction, but it's in the southeast direction. So that's the very first spot the sun's going to hit in the morning. So this is the side of the tree where you're most likely to get a sap run, and it'll be a good sap run. So you're going to get lots of sap. So you always start with a brand new tree that you haven't tapped before on the southeast side. Sometimes you need to consider if there's a microclimate. So if you have a tree that's close to your house can warm up a tree. So maybe it's not the south side of the tree, maybe it's the side of the tree that's closest to the house that you tap. So you need to consider sort of the immediate environment for where you're going to tap a tree.
Yeah, I guess basically all sides of the tree, the sap is going to be traveling up to, get those leaves out and ready. But the darker side of the tree that's colder, is going to have less action. And really what we're looking for, especially with the temperature right now, is that up and down. That's going to make the sap travel across that tap over and over and over again, which gives you a repeat of sap. So that's why you're looking for that bright side. This is a huge tree, which you could probably tap a couple times. Usually I've got a bucket right here, which is usually the width that we're looking for just to get started. But this tree is obviously 6, 7, 8 buckets big. So no problem tapping
so
this
the
one.
rule of thumb we use is, as a minimum, a tree needs to be 12 inches in diameter before you tap it, and then you can go up. So if it's 18 inches or more, then you can put 2 buckets on it. If it's 24 inches or more, you can put 3. I typically don't put more than 3, just because it's hard to position them around the tree.
Yeah, like there's a notch on this side, like John was saying. If you were to tap kind of in the middle of this area, you can't really tell, I guess, on the picture, but it dips inwards, so you're going to have trouble kind of hanging that bucket and making sure that it doesn't wobble around in the wind.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing to consider too, is the wind. The other thing I always do when I'm looking at, if I'm tapping a tree, I look to see what's the condition of the tree. How's it doing? I don't know if Meredith wants to panorama, look around a bit.
This tree is a little bit sad.
Yeah.
We wouldn't probably be tapping this tree right here. Clearly it's had some, age and some wind damage. It's, not in its best condition. A lot of these are quite old and have branches missing, but this one, there's a lot of fresh buds and younger growth on the tips of this tree. So I feel pretty confident. There are some dead areas, but that's not uncommon with a tree that's probably, how old did you say this tree was?
125 years old.
125 years old. So, we're tapping this old lady today. And she looks good, but there's a tree over here that's fallen down, and it's not one that we would maybe tap. And I know that sometimes when you have a winter storm at the end of the season or in the early spring, you'll see that at the end, maybe they've been broken off, you'll see those tips actually forming sapsicles and dripping out onto the side of the road, things like that. So, just gotta,
So let's talk about taps.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different ways you can tap your tree. We at the tool library offer a tapping kit, and it's made up of 5 components. There's a bucket just for carrying your sap. There's the pail with the lid that you hang on, and then there's the actual spigot that you put into the tree. But like I said, there's a bunch of different types here. Just 2 examples. The metal one, which is the one I like, this is a plastic one. It's, if you notice, it's much thinner compared to this, but quite honestly, there's a whole bunch of different types of taps you can get depending on what you want to do. Sometimes people, you can get taps that don't drip out, that you actually put a line into and you can drain off. There's some taps that permanently go into trees. That's typically for commercial producers. But these are the ones I like, nice and sturdy. This is made of stainless steel. It's going to last for a couple of seasons. Specifically with this tap, the part that you want to get into the tree is that section, which is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long. And that's actually your stop. So as you push your tap in, that spot right there should rest up against the bark of the tree, so the surface of the tree. So that's how far you want it to go in. And there's little slits and cracks along here, and that's kind of what the sap goes into. And at the bottom, there's a little hole that all pours in there, and then it comes out this end.
Yep.
One of the things I always tell people about is you only need to slightly tap your spigot in. You don't need to really smash it with a hammer. So this is one that's no good anymore. It's really been hit quite hard.
The plastic ones, I use quite a few of those, but they can be quite brittle as well. So if you're a beginner tapper, it's honestly a lot easier to go with the metal, because you're not going to damage that tap, and you're not going to, most likely, not going to break it off into the tree.
Yeah.
Which can happen with the plastic. And I find too that the tree also shrinks a lot around the plastic and becomes really difficult to remove in comparison.
Yeah. 100%. So standard hammer, if you're going to use this one, really baby taps with it. This is mine. This is one specifically for tapping trees, and it's made out of aluminum. And Meredith, you can just tell them, weighs nothing, right?
Nothing. I'm trying to like balance it here. Yeah, it's very, very light. It probably
it's super light.
Yeah.
And the other nice thing
compared to the
about
other
it
one.
is on the end it's designed to pull the actual tap out of the tree, so you can hook around that little stop and then pull the tap out from the tree.
You can also use like a small rubber mallet,
Yep.
but you do not want to overdo the taps into the tree because it will consume that tap, especially if you break it off. Yeah.
So the traditional way of tapping a tree has been with just a hand drill, and we actually have two of these at the tool library. So if you want to be really old school, you can come take out one of our hand drills and tap with the tree. I choose to use a cordless electric drill.
The modern way. The nice thing about the old-fashioned style is that kids can give it a try. They're not gonna like fly off with this tool, like electric tool, and hurt somebody. Probably not either way, but we used to do that with the high school students. It takes a little bit more elbow grease, but it works.
It does indeed. So I use electric drill, and the drill bit that I use is it's a 1746, so which sounds like a weird number, but it's that's the one, 1746. We actually have two of these drills. They're specialized drills that we purchased for tapping trees that are in our inventory at the tool library. So you can come take those out if you want to tap trees.
Bring them back quick so other people can use them.
Yeah. What I've done is I put a little bit of tape on here. That's my marker for how deep I want to drill, and that is 1.5 inches. So I know when this tape gets to the surface of the tree, it's time for me to stop drilling. And we'll do that right now. So.
I've also seen people use like a Sharpie marker on their own drill bits, white paint that's not going to come off. Just something to tell you when you've reached the right point.
Yeah. Some people, what they do is they put a little section of plastic tube on that goes out to the end. In fact, one of the drill bits we have is like that. It has a little section of plastic tube, so it acts as a stop, if you will.
Now, in terms of this depth, not only does that match up with our actual taps, but when we look at the tree again, from a biological standpoint, we have to get through a pretty thick layer of bark, and then we're actually getting into the sap wood. So we're not tapping as deep as the heartwood, obviously, but we do need to get through a decent amount of the crust of this tree.
Yeah. So the actual tapping of the tree. What we want to do when we drill into the tree is we want to drill up in a slight angle, because obviously we want the tap to go in and then we want the sap to run down from level, maybe 15 degrees up. But just, you can just eyeball it. You just want it so that it's slightly up, and then the sap is going to run down the spigot. So when you start drilling, put the drill bit against the bark. Don't start away and drill like this, because if the bark is frozen, when the drill bit hits it, it can actually break the bark apart a lot more and damage the tree. Don't want to do that. So you want to start, and it also helps you then kind of figure out what angle you want to do it at. So there you go. I'm going to drill like this, upwards into the tree.
John's leaning against the drill to give it some light pressure. Slow and steady. If you have kids doing this, make sure that they're putting the right amount of pressure, not slipping around.
A little bit frozen.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little bit frozen, but we can see some moisture. Oh yeah, so we're definitely already ready to go here.
Yeah. One of the things that's important that's good is that you have white wood coming out. So if the tree has been damaged previously, maybe when it was younger, there was a branch there that broke off, or there was a tap and maybe we missed it. When you drilled, the wood that came out would have been much darker. And also the sap coming out, that tells us we've got a nice spot for us. It's important to keep this, make sure this is cleared out. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll drill it again once I've done the first drill, just to get any little loose pieces out.
Yeah, and you can see he went back and forth. Oh yeah.
All right.
Any gaps are filled up by the.
So that's cleared out. sometimes if it's dry, I'll just go and get the...
This is lower down. It's dripping from there, guys.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really, really ready to go today. So we've got a beautiful day for this.
So let's put the tap on.
Let's do it. Today is about +3, +4. It actually feels quite warm in the sun area here, so it really is the perfect temperature. So John's keeping with that angle. We've already got sap fighting him. We're just trying to tap it in here. He's just keeping that same angle that we drilled. And it came all the way back to that point that we wanted it to. Not all the way pressing into the tree, but still a little bit of leverage. It's going absolutely crazy.
There we go.
Earlier, John mentioned the ratio, and we need 40 buckets of sugar maple sap to create 1 bucket of syrup. I find that usually it's maybe a little less than that, but just depends on the tree. If you're tapping other trees, I know I've tapped a lot of Norways in the past, and they actually have a slightly higher sugar content.
80 to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, so double.
Double, yeah. Of course, you can also tap birch trees, but that's about 85, 90 to 1 ratio, and it's a little bit bitter, I find, but it's interesting. It's interesting.
It's great for making alcohol, though.
There you go.
Very popular in a lot of Scandinavian and Eastern European countries. Yeah, that's going to fill up probably by tomorrow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep. And so, of course, you the lids have this really neat little wire that goes through the top of the spile. Every single spile has this, essentially. If you don't have something like that for your bucket, if you're DIYing this, you can just use any piece of wire that could fit through. You know, it doesn't have to be solid wire. It could be a little bit loose, but that's going to stop debris from the tree from falling in, chipmunks, and eventually, when it warms up, this is the signal of the beginning of spring. You could be preventing butterflies and insects from getting in there. Not always, but...
Oh yeah, you'll get ants at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's when you know it's kind of over. So, yeah.
But you're going to strain it numerous times before it actually ends up turning to syrup. So yeah, it's okay. It's a little bit drips on the ground, or an ant comes and takes a little bit. That's okay. That's just nature doing its thing.
But yeah, so this might fill up by tomorrow. The season goes on and on until the daytime and nighttime temperatures kind of even out a bit warmer. You'll notice that the sap will get a little bit cloudy. That's definitely an indicator of the end.
Yeah.
And I also find that it smells a little different when you're boiling it. Yeah.
So when I run the Urban Sugaring Project and people are bringing me their sap, I always taste and smell it to make sure it hasn't gone moldy or gone off. But also at the very end of the season, what's coming up from the ground, the minerals and the different proteins,
The tannins, heavier tannins, and
it'll taste what's called, it gets a buddy flavor, and that corresponds to the tree budding. It changes the nature of the sap, and you don't want to boil that down into syrup, because if you do, it's super bitter, and 1 bucket can ruin your whole batch. So
yeah.
You're always tasting it, always looking at it, make sure that it tastes nice. It should just be like a slightly sweetened water.
Yep. I know I've definitely seen a lot of health food companies selling just pure sap to drink. So you could also do that if you want. I definitely know people who do that. So once you have your bucket going, if you have a bucket like this, I have a couple Home Depot buckets. Could be something, as long as you can clean this out fairly sanitary. And food grade. You're going to bring your sap buckets over to a main bucket or some kind of housing. Put it through a strainer of some kind, a mesh strainer, maybe some cheesecloth, or a super clean towel.
I like to use a sieve.
A sieve, yep. Get all that stuff out of there just initially. A couple other places that are doing that, so we'll show that later on. But you want to keep your sap essentially refrigerated once you've collected it, if you're not boiling right away. But once you have it, just keep adding it to the boiler and you're off to the races.
Yeah. You can store it outside in a cool, dry place out of the sun, and as long as the daytime temperatures are not going above 10 degrees, then it's pretty good for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But if it warms up, like you get a 15 or 18 degree day, then yeah, you gotta try to either pack snow around your containers or get them inside somewhere, like into a basement where they'll stay cool.
I know people have gotten like jugs and they put it in their refrigerator or their cold room. If you really have to store your sap that way, I like to just get that boil going, especially if you have a lot. So, but yeah. So that's all for tapping maple trees today. John's got a couple more to do in this area if he wants to collect these. But we're not running the urban sugaring this year. We did bring the sign out here, but we're not running it this year just due to social distancing and not being able to have our pancake breakfast and all that. But we'll be really excited for that hopefully next year. On Thursday, I'm doing a workshop with the Guelph Seed Library about winter sowing in containers. Something you can do right now, place it outside, and they'll come up in the early spring. We're going to make little mini greenhouses. So if you want to sign up for that on Thursday or Sunday, please contact Susan at the Seed Library through Facebook or email us at the Guelph Tool Library. There's a lot of stuff coming up, so stay tuned for that. I'll put out some announcements of all the workshops. But yeah, we've had an absolutely gorgeous day. Thank you so much, John, for showing us. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye.